Hi, I'm Laura.
And I'm Harriet, and this is
CT Talks, bringing you insightful virtual conversations
with the people of Caltrans.
In each episode, we'll dive into the world of transportation, sharing stories from the road and discussing the latest innovative projects happening at Caltrans.
If you're curious about what goes on at one of the largest state departments, join us as we explore all things Caltrans. Live and recorded.
Get ready to ask your questions in the chat.
Show support and emoji love.
Get ready to be inspired. Let's get started.
Woohoo! Let's go. Episode 17. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to CT Talks, episode 17, Engineering Wildlife Crossings. Really exciting discussion coming your way today. My name's Harriet Simpson, and I'm delighted to be here with Laura Estrada Adams, who I'll kick it over to you right now.
Hi, welcome everybody. As Harriet said, we're excited for this webinar, episode 17, and as the recorded video said, please feel free to share your emojis throughout. So today we have some of our panelists with us, our expert engineers, and who we have joining us today are Sam from D7, we have Chad from D5, we have David from D9, and Julie from D11. Welcome, guys. Say hello to the audience.
Guys.
Hey, everyone.
Hi, everyone.
Yes, and so we're going to head on over to Harriet next, and we're going to introduce the guys to you in more depth.
All right, perfect. Okay, so first up is David Karuba. So David is a resident engineer in Caltrans District 9, which is our Bishop area. While he officially joined Caltrans in 2022, he has worked in construction management, quality assurance, and quality control since 2001, consulting with various agencies, including Caltrans. With over 24 years of experience in construction engineering and management, David also serves as an instructor for Construction Boot Camp, mentoring new employees. Additionally, he provides consultation to the American Concrete Institute, sharing his expertise in concrete construction and standards. Welcome, David. Thank you so much for being here.
Hello.
All right, and with that, we wanted to throw a little spin on getting to know you all. So going to hit you with a couple rapid fire questions. Are you ready?
Bring it.
Okay. In one word, if engineering had a spirit animal, what would it be?
I don't know, beaver.
A beaver. Very, very nifty and a builder. Love it. Okay. Tapping into your sweet tooth real quick. What donut would you choose? A bear claw or an apple fritter?
Bear claw.
Bear claw. All right. All right. And lastly, what's one word your coworkers would use to describe you?
Obnoxious.
Obnoxious. I love it. All right, moving on to the next. Thank you so much for that, David. We're really excited to chat with you. Thank you for being here.
All right, next up, I have the pleasure of introducing Sam Tutuchian. In 2021, Sam joined Caltrans Construction Division in D7, Los Angeles, bringing 14 years of experience in delivering diverse construction projects. His background spans as both a project management and construction management consultant and a Caltrans construction engineer. Additionally, he has worked in utilities deployment with Alphabet, Google Fiber, and as a general contractor for beverage manufacturing and multifamily property owners. Sam attributes his strong work ethic and sense of urgency to his family's influence, while his attention to detail and moral compass were shaped during his time at UC Berkeley, where he earned a BSc in engineering in 2008. Outside of work, Sam is fortunate to exist in chaos alongside his wife, their 2-year-old son, a spirited Vishla, and 2 fully clawed tabbies. Wish him luck. It sounds like Sam has his own personal cougars at home. All right. So Sam, next, you're getting the rapid fire question. So if an engineer had a spirit animal, what would it be?
A turtle.
A turtle. Next up, what donut would you choose, Sam? Bear claw or apple fritter?
A fritter. All day.
All the yummy apples and cinnamon, right?
Yeah, all day. Apple fritter.
All right. Okay. So one word that your coworkers would use to describe you?
Necessary.
All right. Love it. All right, Harry, you're next.
All right, next up is Chad Storr. So Chad's been with Caltrans in project management at District 5 North, which is San Luis Obispo, for nearly 2 years. Prior to signing on with Caltrans, he previously worked at the City of Pismo Beach for 10 years as an engineer, performing multiple duties, including development review, encroachment permit issuance and inspection, capital improvement project management, and working with Caltrans, FHWA, and FEMA on an emergency relief funded perspective within the city. Prior to his time with the City of Pismo Beach, Chad worked at Fugro Consultants for 9 years, performing geotechnical consulting and special inspection work, spending significant time in the field. He is a graduate of Cal Poly San Luis Obispo with a bachelor's and master's in science in civil engineering. He lives in Atascadero, California with his wife Brittany and 3 children, Roland, Vaughn, and Shay. Welcome, Chad. And you know we're going to hit you with the rapid fire questions too.
I do.
So, Chad, if engineering had a spirit animal, what would it be?
A wolverine.
Oh, okay. I like it. I like it. I love everyone's got different answers too. Okay, sweet tooth. Which donut are you choosing, the fritter or the bear claw?
I would, based on my answer for the first question, I think I'd have to go with a bear claw.
Sticking with the claws. I like it. I like it. And finally, what's one word your coworkers would use to describe you?
I would hope cooperative.
That's a good one.
I think that's probably a good word.
That's a good one. Yeah, always good. Pleasure to have you here, Chad. Thank you so much for bringing your insights. We're excited to chat.
You got it.
All right, next up, I have the pleasure of introducing Julie Malikyar. Julie is a seasoned transportation engineer with over 20 years of experience at Caltrans District 11 in San Diego. Julie began his career in 2000 as a transportation engineer in the traffic division before moving to the Division of Design in 2002. There he spent 18 years as a designer and became a project engineer in 2003 after earning a professional engineer license. In 2021, Julie took an acting role as the district office engineer and was later promoted to senior transportation engineer in 2022. Now serving as project manager and design manager, Julie leads multiple projects overseeing the planning, design, and execution of key transportation infrastructure. Welcome, Julie. Thanks for joining us. And you're the last one to do the rapid fire questions, so you've had a lot of time to think of your answers. So what would you say for question number 1? If engineering had a spirit animal, what would it be, Julie?
Gotta be the goat.
I love that.
Greatest of all
Greatest
time.
That was perfect. Very fitting. All right. So what kind of donut are you, or would you choose, Julie? The bear claw or the apple fritter?
Apple fritter all the way.
All right. You and Sam, apple fritters. All right. And then lastly, what would your coworkers describe you as?
The chill dude. Pretty chill.
All right. Love it. Love it. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. And next up to you, Harriet.
All right. So before we get started getting into the questions, we wanted to give everyone kind of a high-level overview of everything that goes into engineering, because in chatting with these guys, there is so much that goes into planning these projects. So we were chatting with everyone about how to give you a nice little infographic of the different phases and kind of shows where everyone's at with these projects. So Chad, can I kick it to you to give us a little high-level overview for our audience?
Yeah, definitely, Harriet. So I think Harriet kind of explained it well. We just, the purpose of the CT talks today isn't totally specific to the project phases that are involved with the project here at Caltrans from beginning to end. But yeah, I think this is a good brief overview, but you can see there on screen, there's basically 7 stages associated with a project, beginning with the K phase, which is initially that project initiation document to get the project going. Then our 0 phase, which is where we identify permits, agreements, environmental documents, environmental permits specifically. The project starts to get a little bit more developed from a little bit more of a design standpoint, but doesn't really transition into that until you get into phase 1. Once that final environmental document's been reviewed and approved at the 0 phase, then we really start designing the project, have a series of constructability reviews, all in preparation for advertisement and award of the project. All the while, right-of-way support's going on. simultaneously with phase one, and that's where a lot of the property acquisitions are identified that are necessary to build the project. And then once we've got a contractor on board, we go into phase three and phase four, and you can see there's some names there associated with some of these phases from the panelists that we have today. And you can see with 3 and 4, that's where David and Sam really start kicking it into gear from a construction standpoint. So supporting that construction of the project, all of which has a cost associated with it, which falls under phase 4 construction capital. And then, of course, property isn't free. Easements aren't free to be able to build a project. So we need to employ some right-of-way capital to be able to facilitate. And myself and Dooley kind of are involved with the project from beginning to end, kind of above managing everything, hence the name project manager. But you can see Sam and David as well integral with the whole entire process from beginning to end. So I think that's a good summary, Harriet, for the group.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much, Chad. So this will be really helpful as we go through this discussion and kind of if you're referencing these phases, everyone has a little bit more of an insight. So thank you so much for that. Appreciate it. And now we've got a fun little video introductions of each of your projects. So I'm going to kick it over to Laura to get us started with that.
Are the videos playing? There we go. Okay. All right, so this is D9 with David. And so David, can you talk to us about what we're looking at here, a little bit more details?
Primary project that I was involved with is the Sower Project, Animal Crossing. We installed several underground culverts for the mule deer here you can see in the video. There's one of the culverts going in. There's 2 in total. They're approximately 16 to 18 foot diameter, depending on which one you're at. This area here gets it's very rural, but it's also US 395. It's a primary route for us. It was thinking this area. There's something like let me see my note. There's something like 184 deer and other species that have been hit here in the last 22 years. But those are just the reported strikes. We had just this spring when we were working, we had 17 strikes on the job site, and those were all unreported. So you can extrapolate how many deer actually get hit in this area and how critical this work was to install. There's one of them right there, and you can see how large it is, large enough for vehicles to pass through. Not as exciting as big overpass jobs, but I think under crossings are probably more of the more traditional and more affordable crossings that we employ.
All right, thank you. All right, and then next up, our next video, this is D7 with Sam. So Sam, walk us through this video.
Yeah, so you have the kind of a south elevation of the crossing in its current state. Actually, this is a pretty recent photo. We have the drainage layer. It's kind of gravel that allows for the free flow of water under what will be the planting lifts, right? Yeah, underneath you just saw those 82 precast girders. It's really an impressive structure. 175 by 210 feet. It's just about the size of a proper freeway overpass. So it's a very, very impressive structure. That is the erection sequence in the evenings. We had close to 25 consecutive directional closures of 101 freeway with over 300,000 cars a night and a day, and we had no recorded complaints. I think that just is a testament to the partnership that we developed not only with National Wildlife Federation, but all the project partners, MRCA, City of Agoura Hills, Wildlife Conservation Board, and of course the Wallace Annenberg Foundation providing the majority of the support for the project. So it was a very, very meaningful project and a demonstration in partnering that is rare at the state, truly. Yeah.
All right, thank you, Sam. Getting lots of emoji love, so keep that coming.
Yeah.
All right, and the next video is D5 with Chad. So Chad, give us some more details of this project.
You can see on there the first slide, State Route 17, Laurel Curve Wildlife Crossing. This is in the Santa Cruz area. I'd say a little bit northeast of Santa Cruz to be specific. It's basically a section of road that is between Santa Cruz and San Jose. And we say Laurel Curve because it's a particular spot on Highway 17 that has a curvature to it and is in a corridor that's used by, not one, not two, not even three, basically all different types of wildlife, as you could see in those videos that we just displayed, but basically consists of an overpass structure that was built with a path underneath it for wildlife to be able to use and get accustomed to in this area of Highway 17. Continuing to go through the videos here, you can see deer, bobcat, coyote, fox, mountain lion, primarily. We've had a lot of documented use for this overcrossing via wildlife cameras, as you can see. I want to say that was the first mountain lion recorded, may have been first, second, not 100% sure there, but a lot of activity already. And again, I think like all of these projects that Sam just went through, David went through, and that Dooley went through, a lot of partnership associated with these projects. A lot of teamwork associated with bringing something like this to completion. So thanks.
All right, and then we have the last video. This is D11 with Dooley. So Dooley, tell us a bit more about this upcoming project.
Yes, so this is on I-8 near the Imperial County and San Diego County is basically right around there. I think we're trying to develop a wildlife crossing and a directional fencing for the increasing permeability for bighorn sheep and other wildlife, but mainly for the bighorn sheep. And also just wanted to mention that between the eastbound and westbound, we have a divided highway where, there's this big, what we call an island. This island is pretty much used, as you can see on the left of the video, so that majority of the time these sheep, they try to cross the highway to get over to that nursery island. It's also referred to as the ewe, and their nursing lambs are found in that location. There's some renderings been done, some studies, and feasibility studies been performed, and we're working together with the agencies and all of our other partners to get this thing off the ground, and we're at the very early phase of the project.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much, Julie. Some beautiful content and footage here. I'm going to head over to the chat really quick. We have several questions coming in, but I'm going to put this one out there. How do wildlife find the new wildlife crossing path? Who would like to jump on that one? Feel free to.
I can go ahead and jump in on that one, Harriet. And some of the environmental folks that were involved with our project would probably even know better. But in my experience and what I've seen is their wildlife, probably similar to humans, right, is not necessarily going to start to use something as soon as it's been implemented. So you could probably see in some of the videos, there's maybe some initial apprehension, but then as they kind of discover that it's starting to become part of their habitat per se, or connecting to areas of it, I think they become a little bit more comfortable and accustomed to it becoming an option. I think we've seen that over the progress of the project that I was involved with, and especially since it's just been completed construction, we've already started seeing so much activity with it. So I think it probably takes some time.
All right, anybody else have a quick response you want to add into that, or? All righty, so what I'm going to do really quickly, I'm going to do a shameless plug for Caltrans LinkedIn. A lot of this content you will see on our feed. I'm going to put a link in the chat there. If you're not following us, please do. We are always constantly sharing the projects and the people of Caltrans, and we would love to have you follow us and engage with us. And next, I'm going to hand it over to Harriet to start off the questions.
Thank you, Laura, and we love a shameless plug. Bring it on. For any of you as well, plug away. Okay, so I'm going to kick it off with Dooley. So what are kind of the key design considerations when engineering a wildlife crossing?
Sure. What I want to do is give a very short uh, history in the background of what's going on here. And give me 1 second. I'm trying to get my 1 second. Slideshow begin from beginning. I'm going to share my
There's
screen.
comments saying you guys probably have the coolest job, and how do they sign up? So, yeah.
There are many openings. Come on down.
Okay.
Come on
So
in.
like I mentioned just a little while ago, we're looking at I-8 freeway where it's kind of starting to split into the east and westbound. And these are the potential crossing areas that were collar tagging of these sheep with the priority locations basically. So what I want to do is go to the next slide and kind of the data that we received. As you can see, the crosses are where the majority of the hits have been. Unfortunately, that's where they've been crossing. So of course, we like to find out. I mean, that's how the priority locations were kind of based. And again, this picture was already shared. I wanted you guys to listen to this. This is the highway. This is eastbound 8, as you can see.
I've got it.
And there's some nursing going on.
The lamb's nursing.
And so that's the portion of the highway that the sheep they're trying to. Unfortunately, when they try to cross, this poor gal got hit. This ewe, as you can see, the broken limbs. I'm just going to share some of these renderings that were provided from a feasibility study. As you can see, these are not, actual design. These are very early phase concepts. As you can see, the topography around the area is pretty rough. So I want to jump into answering your question. The engineering wildlife crossing bridges, I'm going to start with bridges and structures, involves the structures that facilitate safe and effective wildlife movement across highways and freeways. It's imperative to mention that as engineers, we must stay diligent and work together with our environmental counterparts and colleagues to make sure that correct steps, making the right engineering decisions, factors such as species needs, habitat, and safety need, those are be taken into consideration. And then of course, we have to know if it's going to be a bridge versus culvert. In our project sites, there's potentially, crossings that could be an undercrossing, the existing bridges, overpasses that, but the data shows that not that many crossings occur using these underpasses. Maybe they don't have a directional fencing, and that's one of the things that we like to see happen when we design these. The width, it's important how, once we design this bridge selection is really key. Width's going to be around 100 to 200 feet, sometimes even less than 100 on this job. If we're going with a bridge, the bridge deck needs to be kind of mimic the existing surroundings, like matching the soil, rocks, vegetation. It has to be wide enough. It doesn't give the species a sense of entrapment. And of course, we're going to have this directional fencing. I'm going to go a little bit faster. Topography is really important in selection of the bridge locations. Using existing topography to our advantage will give us opportunity to save money and resources. As you could see on the renderings, we look for locations that we have existing topo that have naturally down cut slopes, or not even just a naturally down sloping that would make it easier to construct abutments. sometimes it doesn't exist, so it's going to be challenging. Last but not least, I want to mention that engineering aspects. We look at the seismic reports, the geotechnical reports, hydrology, hydraulic studies. Where are we going to put abutments that bends the columns? Avoiding sensitive areas. There's creeks, there's waters that need to be protected. We have to make sure that we have enough sight distances for traffic. And again, it's the safety of public and the animals. And of course, last thing, stage construction. It's very important. That's kind of like where the construction, the folks that have already built these, like Sam, you understand that whole challenge that we deal with constructing these. So we really have to think about public traffic, using these safely during construction. So that's, I think that should take care of that question. I'm hoping.
Yeah, nice. Thank you. Really in depth. And I love the visuals too. Thank you, Dooley.
Sure.
Where are you at with the approval of these concepts?
So the concepts have not been, these are from older, it was a feasibility report that was done, part of a mitigation report for the wind farm that's kind of like next Ocotillo wind farm. So we have our partners, the agencies that have hired our designer. I think Mark Thomas is our designer for this project, and Caltrans will be doing the oversight. So at this point, we're very close of starting the bridge selection, and I haven't gotten any of that yet because we're still working on just finalizing our co-op and the funding that comes in to.
Sure.
But that's where we are.
Awesome. Big project, big impact. It looks like there's a lot of sheep that are needing to cross over here. My gosh. And I know you shared that sad footage of the one that did get hit, but I can imagine the vehicle that got hit was also not.
Yeah, that's
good.
another
Those are
thing
big
that
sheep.
it is safety for public too.
Yeah.
You really don't want to hit anything that big, and it's it's quite sad for the animals. So, but the safety aspects considered.
Yeah.
That I did put in the chat, the story map, parts of what Dooley just shared and some of the content that we've been sharing. The link is in the chat there 2 different times. If you scroll back, it's called the I-8 Peninsular Bighorn Sheep Story Map. Some great content, and when you have time on your at your own convenience to look at that.
Cool. Thank you, Laura. Laura's going to be plugging little tidbits throughout in the chat, so make sure you check it.
Yeah, so that leads us to the next question. I'm going to start off with Chad. How do you determine the best locations for wildlife crossings?
Yeah, thanks, Laura. Maybe before I answer that specific question, I was going to second something that Dooley had stated about imperative that the engineers and really everybody on a project is working together, and some of these specialists that we have in specific divisions, or we call them functional units on the project. So I totally resonates with me, Dooley, about the project manager, the designers, staying in touch with the environmentalist on the project, which is directly tied to the overall objective, right? So yeah, I just wanted to echo that as well. As far as how we determine these locations, and I think Dooley also offered a little bit on that, is there's multiple ways. Some of which were employed, I know, on the project that I was involved with, was those locations or crash history reports, or strike history reports, whatever we may call them when it comes to wildlife. Kind of tracking the area over a period of time from that perspective, and managing how we monitor accidents that have occurred, what specific type of wildlife was involved in that strike, so that we can be able to determine trends of what type of wildlife, okay, what's our quantity for this type of wildlife, and then being able to that can help you to identify, well, what is the use in that path, as well as what the extents are. As far as actual equipment that's also used that I am aware of is spot cams or trail cameras, strategically placed. And this is also where our partners on a project come into play heavily. And that's where the benefit is to being able to partner with some of the, like, for example, Pathways for Wildlife is one entity that was partnered with and teamed with in one way or another on the SR-17 project that I'm representing. But technology in those cameras has come a long way as well. I just know from personal experience, used to be battery operated and had to regularly go out, take a chip out, clear that chip, gather the photos or videos that were taken, and now solar powered, Wi-Fi capability. So I know all those kinds of things were employed on our project by either ourselves, Caltrans internally, as well as our partners. But when we gather all that information, that's usually the best way to determine about where to position the wildlife crossing. The other thing is being able to emulate as closely as possible and not asking the wildlife to deviate from what they habitually want to do. So that's another factor in it, positioning it. I mean, it could get down to, compass directions, north, south, east, or west. We tilt it more this way. There's a bunch of factors that go into it. Those are some of them.
All right, thank you, Chad. We have a lot of questions coming in here, trying to keep up with that. We'll do our best to get to these, and if we don't get to all of them during the webinar, we will be sending them out to the engineers to answer these the best that they can and send those out to everybody, just so you know. And the webinar is being recorded. We'll be sending the recording link out. Let's see. So I have a question here. Whoever wants to jump on this one. How long do these projects typically take to build in the construction phase?
The big thing that no one likes to hear is that it depends. It depends. It really does. Because when you talk about the construction of it, it's not just about the technical elements like the structural elements or whatever engineering elements you're dealing with. You also have to interact with probably an active causeway. So interacting with traffic managers and understanding how many working hours do you have per day. A lot of people, I know that for many folks who are not in the engineering business or don't interact with Caltrans projects all the time, your only interaction is when you're trying to get home at like 4 a.m. and somehow the freeway is closed and you're in a 10-minute queue, whatever that might be. Believe it or not, there's teams of engineers that all they do in traffic management is make sure that our construction projects, as one of their many responsibilities, that our construction projects do not provide an unreasonable inconvenience to the traveling public. So I think that just understanding that is probably one of the biggest things on an RE's mind is how do I make sure that traffic doesn't back up? Okay, but anyway, that's my 2 cents.
And so Sam, RE is a resident engineer, right?
Right, the resident engineer, which I figured we would have some time to get into that. The idea is that state of California public contracting code is that there needs to be an engineer of record for not only the design phase but also the construction phase. So the engineer in responsible charge of that phase 3 and phase 4 construction support and construction capital, implementing the contract, administrating the contract, that has to be a licensed engineer, and we call them a resident engineer.
Thank you. All right, I'll hand it over to Harry now for the next question.
Yeah, I don't know if you wanted to hit David with question 2 as well.
Sorry about that. I have my screen full blown. So.
I was going to add on to Julie mentioned a little bit, but another, from our project, it was a little bit different. It was designed something like 12 or 15 years ago, and unfortunately it got shelved for a few years, and so we just built it. So it's kind of a little bit outdated approach, but nevertheless, I think a lot of the parts still hold true. For our project, our primary species is the mule deer, and our species is up in the High Sierra Mountains, and then they travel east to Nevada, and then they cross the US 395 there. And a lot of them is fitting it into that existing migration path, using the strike data, like I said earlier. You know, we have something like on average 10 or 12 strikes recorded in this tiny 2-mile segment a year. Again, that's recorded. We're probably in the 40s on the whole year. And then also fitting it into the terrain that we have. If I'll quickly share something real quick. So here is an example of, you know, here's Google Earth, and you can see kind of open terrain, but we have the eastern Sierra Nevada mountains here, and then Nevada over here to the east, and our deer are crossing. They use this corridor for whatever reason, I don't know, but they like this corridor. And then we put ours in here. You can see Hot Creek through here, and the deer tend to follow along that because it's a water source. And then if we went to Street View, you can get a better idea. So we kind of have open terrain. There's some hills on the side, and you know, you could say, hey, well, we could do a big overcrossing right here. Well, the overcrossing costs a lot of money. You're talking 10, 20, $30 million for a single bridge. But also we have, where does that overcrossing tie into over here on this side? It either has to go all the way over here or down into this lower land. Well, this is all protected wetlands, so we can't really put a giant bridge abutment and everything like that. So what we did is the creek is following through here, went underneath the road, right underneath where we're standing, and it continues there. And we just basically put a giant undercrossing here. It's more likely for the deer to cross there. We'll have about 5 miles of fence directing the animals to that. The deer don't typically have a problem with the undercrossings. Bighorn sheep or something like that, other species do have problems with undercrossings. And then again, the undercrossing here, if we were to build a bridge, we could be in the, like I said, $20 to $30 million range easily. Whereas we spent about $250,000 on one animal crossing.
Oh, wow.
So you could put in a lot more of them for that low cost. And there's less impact area to this, you know, protected habitat here. We're really only impacting what's already underneath the road and already impacted versus tying into existing wetlands or crossing over additional creeks or making a big cut into the side of this mountain over here, you know. So that's all I wanted to add on.
Thanks for adding that, David. Very informative, and some great, the renderings that you shared are great. I have a question here if somebody wants to jump in. What type of life expectancy using a CMP for wildlife crossing compared to a concrete structure?
Can you repeat that question?
Yeah, what type of life expectancy using a CMP for a wildlife crossing compared to a concrete structure?
Oh, concrete metal or corrugated metal pipes, they can last.
I was gonna say, what's a CMP?
Yeah, it's a
CMP is
culvert
corrugated metal
option.
pipe.
Okay.
Typical pipe that you would see under crossing. Depending on your actual thickness selection, you could also use plastic or concrete pipes, but they can last just as long as a concrete structure. But there's typically a lot less maintenance associated with culverts rather than bridges. Bridges have a lot more inspection cycles and stuff like that. Culverts can easily be rehabbed with liners, and they're much more affordable to replace when they do inevitably die.
But the environment too, right? If it's a corrosive environment, I mean, like there's all these different factors as to why they would choose one over the other. The Wallace Annenberg Wildlife Crossing is in a corrosive environment. So, you know, the different details that the structures specialists, and I think I do want to make a shout out to our Division of Engineering Services out of headquarters, our bridge specialists, they all come out of Division of Engineering Services, and they take a lot of care and detail into understanding the environment where this crossing is going to be. And so maybe in a corrosive environment, a corrugated metal pipe might have a little bit less of a service life, but our concrete structures are designed for 50 to 100 year service life. So
I'd like to add something as far as the structures. In Caltrans or in transportation, we built structures for cars, pretty much for pedestrians, cars, mostly. But this is unlike structures that we normally see on the highway. It only is designed for animal crossing or wildlife crossing. So with the ones that have traffic on, we have to maintain, and the maintenance is like on a normal, I don't know, every 10 years or there's maintenance projects that will go ahead and make improvements or rehabilitations of the bridge. The one thing that with wildlife crossing bridges is like you have to make sure how it's going to be maintained to preserve its quality, or it lasts what it's supposed to last. Normally, we should be good with the concrete structures, but then with time, you might have issues or something, that if you don't maintain it. Now there's going to be maintenance agreements between state and other agencies. I'm not sure about that right now, but that's something to think about as far as longevity of these. We have to make sure there's some kind of maintenance that would have to reoccur over time. Same thing with the culvert too. I mean, we do the culvert inspections for all our culverts, and they'll be treated the same way. So, sorry, who was speaking?
Oh yeah, no problem. I was just going to add too, and I'm sure David, it was probably heavily talked about during design, involved with his wildlife crossing project. But when we think of culverts, for the purposes of like what Dooley was saying, if we're designing culvert across a highway, we're typically corrugated metal pipe, and the low spot of that pipe is in the flow line of water potentially, right? Well, 9 times out of 10. A lot of the issues with regards to maintenance and keeping track of and monitoring culverts is the bottom's rusted out of this culvert, time to replace it, right? Or line it if it hasn't gotten too far bad. But situation where you're using it as a wildlife crossing, the bottom of that culvert, A, is probably not going to be metal, and B is doesn't necessarily need to be in a low spot, right? So there's a lot of things that would typically apply to a CMP culvert from a longevity standpoint, along with like what Sam was saying with regards to the environment from a potential corrosive soil environment, that I would think would make them very favorable for the purpose of a wildlife crossing. I mean, the cost speaks for itself, right, David? I mean, $250,000 and talking about tens of millions if it works out that way, right? So
yeah, that was just the cost associated with my project. I mean, it could vary from project to project, but yeah, I would say at least a 20-to-1 ratio.
Pretty significant.
but you have to consider the need, right? And like what kind of traffic you get. So for example, if you have like the kind of style that you have there, if you do have like 300,000-400,000 cars going over it, it'll be like banging on a drum in there for them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so like when you consider like the environment that you're working with, it's not just about whether or not it's corrosive, it's whether or not the overall environment will be conducive, and I don't want to say inviting, because I'm very critical of our human environment and what we call inviting, but let's just say tolerable enough for the animals to kind of feel a relationship with that space. So you got to consider that.
Yeah,
Oh,
there's a few questions about the undercrossings. One question from Whoop Whoop Francis, shout out to you. Will your undercrossings have natural light in them? What's the situation with lighting in the undercrossings?
Who is this directed at?
David, it's for
anyone who'd
you.
like to
It's
speak,
for
yeah.
you, brother.
Oh,
You know what? This is, I just want to say, this is Francis.
No,
This is
no,
Francis Apia, one of our senior biologists out of District 7. He's working on the wildlife
no,
crossing.
we
He's
we
always
don't have any
He's a
lighting.
legend.
Our culverts are only about 80, 90 feet long. We just depend on the radiant lighting to come through. We do have another project coming up, and that was a possible consideration. It is through a divided highway section, is to open it up in the middle to allow kind of a natural skylight, if you will, to come let that light pour in and make it more. I think there's a technical term like the open space ratio or something to that effect. That does need to be considered in a culvert situation. Obviously, an overpass is going to feel like the most natural crossing for an animal.
Well, thank you, David. Yeah, really interesting. And Sam, you kind of did a good segue as well as this question into the needs of the different species. So can you kick us off with that, Sam? Is, how do you really account for the needs of each species in the design of crossings?
Yeah, to put it simply, and to kind of give respect where it's due, I don't. It's the biologists. It's all of the supporting team that kind of makes these crossings happen. And I just want to say that those biologists and folks from the National Park Service, for example, down here we have MRCA. And not to mention National Wildlife Federation and their support staff, right? We just have a bunch of really passionate people that make it their priority to give a voice to the voiceless. Okay. And so, whether it's, supporting species that kind of help maintain the balance for the entire food chain, or in our case, we had a particular focus on the apex predator because we happen to be, Los Angeles is one of the last metropolises that actually has an apex predator living, I don't want to say in harmony, but somehow fighting to exist with humans here, So, as Caltrans engineers in responsible charge, it's important. We have a huge responsibility, but we're nothing without all of our supporting functional units doing work exactly like that. Yeah.
Thank you, Sam. Yeah, I love the emphasis on the collaboration with all the partners, both internally with Caltrans and externally. Really huge. This is not a one-man job, obviously, and so it's huge. Thank you for the shout outs though too. Really appreciate it. Chad, do you have any insights on that question too? How do you account, or maybe not you specifically, but how do we account for different species? There you go.
Yeah, I know there was a particular video. I don't have it handy, but I think it was included in the intro for my project, Harriet and Laura. A prime example of that is the video that showcased the bobcat. I had talked earlier about maybe initial apprehension, having to warm up with regards to the use of the undercrossing. You can see we had slope like a trapezoidal shaped embankment. Sounds like Harriet might be pulling it up. You can see kind of a trapezoidal configuration, but then as you get to the underside of the abutment, there was essentially kind of a few foot bench up against each abutment, and that's the one that I was referring to. But it's little things like that, depending on the species that's going to be using the infrastructure. I mean, you can see there the deer going right through it at the bottom part, but you could see the wildlife was using all the way up to directly underneath the abutment. So I think when we talk about it multiple ways of being able to address the species that are going to be using it, it pays to analyze what we think. And again, not in my wheelhouse, and seconding what Sam had said, the biologists, all of the environmental team in coming to the table with design about how they're actually going to use it. But it could be as much as gradient of the slopes, providing a bench for some of the smaller critical critters if needed. There's multiple ways. Those are just a few.
And I'll add, I'll throw something else out there too. I'll give you one example of something that's kind of an integrated approach on the Wallace Annenberg Wildlife Crossing, that kind of stewarded by the landscape architect. We have Robert Rock with Rock Design Associates. The notion of gathering the seeds of the plants to be planted on the crossing itself from a very, very hyper local geography. The idea being that, yeah, sure, we can go to a nursery and get plants that are certified as some kind of a native, but there could be some genetic variations that really thrive or really are familiar to this specific location. So those seeds were harvested from a very short radius around the job site, around the project location. And also they're being cultivated in a nursery very close to the project site. And so this should mimic a plant that as much as possible, even though it's on an engineered structure in an engineered substrate, it should look and feel as much like the plants around it as possible. If you think about these animals, they have senses far beyond what humans are in touch with. I shouldn't say what we have. We probably have it. We just forgot how to deal with it. But they can sense these minor differences. And so that's just one example of accounting for different species. It's not about the different species. It's about making sure that it looks and feels as much like the surrounding as possible to allow for all those species to come through.
Sure, really interesting. Thank you both for the insights there. Really cool to how much goes into it. And again, the partnership with all the other stakeholders is really, really cool to see how extensive of the prep work that goes into it to make sure it's going to be the most efficient crossing. So thank you so much.
I want to add really quickly, just following up on that. Beth Pratt with National Wildlife Federation has a comment in the chat there. Great point about the cost, but important to note that not all wildlife will use under crossings, and those do not serve biological needs for a wide array of wildlife and plants as well. You have to look at the biological need for every site, not just the cost.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Beth, for that. And I also want to say thanks to our panelists too, because I see you guys are doing a really great job at trying to answer as many questions as you can in the chat. So we appreciate that. And to Francis Apia as well. A lot of our experts in the field are here in the chat and trying to answer as we're going along. So thank you guys so much.
Teamwork. Love it.
Yes, absolutely. All right, so that leads me to the next question. How does wildlife crossings contribute to driver safety and reduce vehicle wildlife collisions? And I'm going to start off with Chad.
Yeah, thanks, Laura. Well, I think first and foremost, once the wildlife becomes accustomed to the structure that was built, then there's an alternative path for them to cross from one portion of their habitat to another, rather than actually going across the road. I think the other thing is too, and I believe David mentioned something about it, but in these projects, I know in our project there was also an element that was added with regards to wildlife jump outs and also fencing to be able to, in an attempt based on patterns that our environmental team is able to be privy to, guide them to where they can go underneath the road rather than over the road. So if we experience that, if we see that, then there are less animals crossing the road. The hope is less animals crossing the road, and it was placed in a pretty strategic location based on some of the points I was making earlier. Then vehicle wildlife collisions, the hope is that they decrease because you get more wildlife taking their own route per se, or the route that we've provided them, rather than crossing the road and interacting with vehicles.
All right. Anybody else want to add on to that?
All sound good.
And it speaks for itself. I think the simplicity there. I mean, we are very passionate about what we do, and there's many aspects to that to answer that question. But I think it speaks for itself. One funny thing is determining who is. Anytime we have a project, we have to determine who is the customer, right? Who is the customer, right? Most of the time, our customer is the traveling public and maintenance, and in this particular case, it's the traveling public, maintenance, and also the traveling wildlife. And so when you consider that both the wildlife and the traveling public are a lot safer, that's, I think, where the win is. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Harry, do you have any questions in the chat you want to bring up?
Let me see. Well, it's interesting because we're speaking about the wildlife. So there's a question here from Evie talking about when building wildlife crossings to support a protected or endangered species, how do these same animals maybe impact the construction of the project? It's kind of interesting. So if they're sited near or within the project site, does the whole project stall? And does it have to be a biologist always present on site? Does anyone want to take that? It's kind of interesting.
Sam, have you guys encountered that?
I just hate taking up the space, but yes, of course we have. In fact, very famously on our project, I mean, it was kind of, anytime we start a construction project, there's always this risk that there could be utilities in the way. And so utility relocation is something that makes most project professionals kind of shudder. Utilities are necessary, by the way. I want to make that part abundantly clear. They are necessary. We all depend on them. So we shouldn't besmirch their contribution to our society. But yeah, it takes a lot of time. So as the utility relocations were occurring, we had a stub pole, a stub power pole, and somehow a woodpecker started nesting in there. And what are you gonna do? So we all had to stop, right? And actually, this was one of Beth Pratt, one of her kind of moments, right, where she's like, yeah, if there was ever a reason that would make me happy to stop the project, it would be the woodpecker in our utility pole there. So yeah, we deal with it all the time. We have nesting seasons where we have to have biologists come out and certify before we so much as brush up against a bush or anything else that could possibly have nesting in it. And there's also specific species that will be called out in special provisions depending on your location. And you'd be surprised, the most desolate, middle of nowhere desert. And somehow there is a very sensitive species there. And the Caltrans Environmental Planning and Stewardship team always makes sure that the construction team is safe in that regard.
Mm.
So I want to follow up on that. This reminds me of the first webinar that we did on wildlife crossings with Francis Apia and Selena Oliveri. You missed that episode. I'm putting another link in the chat right now for previous episodes to watch those and catch up on some of that.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and I'll add on to Sam. I'll echo a lot of it. We had full-time biologists on site. We had several protected species. We have nesting seasons like he was talking about. We also have we had a time frame where we couldn't start until after 10 o'clock in the morning. We could only work from 10 to 6 because of sage grouse nesting.
Oh, wow.
Which nesting? Which?
So we accommodate for a lot of the other species, not just our target species, the mule deer.
Wait,
Did you say
which
sage
nesting?
grouse?
Which nesting was it?
The bi-state sage grouse.
Sage grouse.
Excellent.
They have what they call their lek, and that's their mating season, their mating times, and they prefer those dawn and low light times, I guess. And we weren't able to work, but from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. is the only time we were able to work.
But did you guys make sure to leave the radio on with some Barry White playing for them?
Oh my God.
That's awesome. No, it's great to hear that so much consideration goes into this. Really,
Yeah.
really cool.
All right, you're up next, Harriet.
Okay. There was another question earlier on that talked about, I mean, obviously we've had a lot of really fantastic footage that we've shared today. How do we go about the coverage with the cameras? Is that just automatically on a project? What's kind of the process of getting video coverage to track the species coming across or coming under the crossings?
I was just gonna jump in. I see some others were gonna jump in. I lean heavily on our environmental team, our biologist, to be able to and our partners on the project, whoever those partners may be, in the positioning of cameras, the quantity, based on their experience and their expertise. So I would say heavily dependent on the environmental team that's working with us on the project.
Awesome.
Yeah, we had a battery of cameras set up prior to the work to monitor movement. And then during construction, we had a series of cameras. One of them was just more for our own sake, time lapse photography, fun. And then they are continuing to monitor, and I think they're going to monitor for at least 5 years after the project.
Oh, wow.
To our partners and the external agencies, we received some of the good, like a story map from credit goes to Devin O'Day of Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. He provided they basically visited the site way earlier, prior to even Caltrans being they did an outreach to us, so they were very involved. They like the data and stuff, of course, with the tagging and the coloring of the ewes and the movement, but then of course the cameras and but a lot of the video footage that was taken by the teams that visited the site. And of course, it's like it's good to go out there, but then at times it's challenging. You're in a very mountainous terrain. You have to be careful. And they captured a lot of the good, like that nursing lamb, and of course, and unfortunately, the ones that were hit. And some of those captures. It's good for the project to get going because okay, we see a concern. You see how these species are being killed, unfortunately, and the data is only like the ones that are reported. It's on that map that I shared. The ones that are not reported, there's a lot of those. And yeah, so I think it's a good time for us in San Diego County, of course, and District 11 to pursue and try to initiate this PID phase and eventually going into design and construction of a crossing of any kind, whether it's under or over. We see it might be at least one structure involved, and yeah. Just wanted to add that.
I have a question here too in the chat. Are there any efforts for connectivity with wildlife crossings so wolves and wild horses would be able to access the Santa Monica Mountains?
That is really cool. I suspect that there won't be like a bouncer at the bridge keeping wild, horses and wolves away, but I'm just not sure we have a lot of that out here. And to be honest, I'm a little bit out of my depth. Maybe our project biologist, like I said, Francis or Selena, can comment on whether or not in the chat on whether or not we do have the presence of those wildlife, but I'm not aware of any.
The wolves and the wild horses. So we'll be looking for Francis's comment in there.
Yeah.
No pressure.
I will
But that's
say
a cool
there's
one. I never, I'll be honest. We've discussed so many different species and so many different needs, and this was the first time I've heard of that, and that is really cool.
Yeah, I see there's a comment too from an environmental scientist, I believe, on our team here, just making a comment to everybody here on the panel saying that as an environmental scientist, it's so awesome to hear these engineers so knowledgeable about wildlife and biology. Thank you all.
Yeah, there's another one saying fantastic, heartwarming, and makes me proud to work for Caltrans from another Caltrans employees. So just kudos to you all for the phenomenal job you're doing.
And if I may, there's another one in here that I think is really critical, and I did miss mentioning this earlier, but I think that Ken D. Vance is making an extremely, extremely important point, and quite frankly, I'm a little bit, down on myself for forgetting to mention that, but there was a lot of legwork with the tribal partners and the council locally here. And it's not only that there was a lot, there still continues to be a considerable amount of engagement, particularly with Secretary Crowfoot and many others, and many, many others. But understanding that, there is a history to where we are that far predates any of our agencies and most of our engineering practices. And treating those tribal partners with that level of deference, it goes a long way. It goes a long way. So thank you, Kendi, for keeping me honest on that front. I honestly, I forgot.
Yeah, and I'd like to read her comment really quickly, Sam, too, for everybody. in case you don't see it in the chat, but Kendi's just sharing it's super imperative to also include the conversation and early talks and engagement with our tribal partners. In her experience, they are some of the most critical, most knowledgeable, possess so much history on migration patterns and behavior, appreciate the connection between land and animals. And last but not least, they are some of the best stewards I've ever had the pleasure to work with. Include the tribes in these conversations. Sometimes they can partner with funds or apply for grants that we cannot. So thank you for sharing that, Kendi.
And just to follow up on our previous question, Francis did respond saying there are no wolves and no wild horses, but we have foxes, lions, and more. So there we go.
Thank you, Francis.
But as Sam said, no bouncers on the crossing. So
That's
if they're
right.
around, they're welcome to cross along. But speaking of all these species, kind of leads us nicely to our next question, which was what kind of species have benefited the most from existing wildlife crossings? I'm going to kick that to Chad real quick.
Yeah, thanks, Harriet. We, as you saw in the introduction, the State Route 17 Laurel Curve Wildlife Crossing, as evidenced by the video, is mountain lion and deer. Our primary species that we've seen here just in the little over a year since the wildlife crossing's been constructed. But you can also see from the videos there's a handful of other wildlife. I mean, you saw essentially the little family of foxes there
My
that are
favorite.
playing,
So cute.
playing around underneath the structure. And then you see the bobcat. I do believe there was video of coyote potentially that may have been using the newly constructed project. So I would say mountain lion and deer for mine. But kind of like Sam was saying, there's no bodyguard at the gates to this, so you never know what those cameras are going to pick up. So yeah, a lot of different wildlife.
I'll add, like we keep repeating it. I'll make sure to point out that although there's nothing preventing animals from crossing, these crossings are intended for animals, right? And there are plenty of strategies to make sure that it stays an animal crossing and that we don't have errant or unwanted human crossings. But I do have kind of a funny twist on the idea of which species has benefited the most from the crossing. Certainly, Chad, not to take away from your point because I understand, but I want the whole team to zoom out for a moment and to consider. I think it's human beings, that have probably benefited the most. When you consider every single strike that doesn't happen, strikes are traumatizing. I mean, for people in urban environments, I know that people who live in more rural environments are probably more used to seeing maybe some more graphic interactions with animals. But if you've been around like a real strike, it's graphic, it's traumatizing, right? So for every one of those we reduce, it's a huge benefit to the human, right? But there's another piece to it too. And that is that when our ecology falls apart, like we always define ourselves as separate from our wild open spaces and we're humans and they're not and whatever else. But just consider that when their ecology falls out of balance, there's ramifications for us. When we see prevalence of things like avian flu, they come and they rip through our monoculture farm areas and whatever else, right? Those things, when your wild areas are in a balanced ecosystem and a balanced ecology and you have the right mix of all the different species, you're not going to see those things explode through our wild populations, right? And that makes our entire, as one example, that makes our whole food supply more secure. So for me, I kind of like to think that although it's nice to bend on our altruism that, hey, we're doing this for them, I think really deep down we understand that without them, we're going to be in a lot of trouble. So I kind of like to look at it from that point of view. Of course, Chad, like I said, it doesn't take away from the fact that they are directly, kind of benefiting from it. But I think we do quite a bit as well.
Super interesting point. Yeah.
Yeah, good point.
All right, Laura, do you want to get to our next question?
Sure, and I did just put another link in the chat really quickly for our partners at Land Trust of Santa Cruz County. It's their website. And it was something that Chad was just speaking on, the Laurel Curve project, if you're interested in learning more there. Let's see.
There's a question. When did you begin communication with the tribal nations? And regarding our project, as early as pre-planning phase, we give them a general idea of what's going on. It's very important, very key to keep them well aware of what's happening in the region, especially with the project coming up. And of course, during our environmental phase, a more detailed consultation type of work will be done. But at this juncture right now, we've our biologists and we've actually reached out to the tribe, and they're well aware of what's to come as far as our wildlife crossing projects. Just wanted to throw that in there.
All right, thank you, Julie. That actually goes into the next question, which you're going to lead, Julie, is just talking more, elaborating on the collaboration with the biologists, conservation, and the other agencies on these projects. And that's for you, Julie.
Sorry, I muted myself.
Oh,
And now I'm back up.
no worries.
Great. So yeah, collaboration, of course, comes in, joining hands and minds, coalition of internal, external stakeholders, and the experts comprised of biologists, scientists, engineers, tribal outreach reps, conservationists for projects such as these wildlife crossings. We have to put a team together and be able to share and pass along knowledge. Like a lot of the stuff that I'm learning myself from a lot of these scientists, the biologists that are, we having our monthly meetings and our quarterly meetings. So we want to make by having this knowledge and making the project move forward swiftly. Here in Caltrans, as we know, we are part of the California public workforce. We want to assure that our end users they get it's all about their safety. It has to be given. That's their number one priority. We want to make sure that animal crossing projects they do play a big safety role for the public and for the species that we're providing. So we work as a team from very early planning phase, such as this one on I-8, to final construction working day. So we're going to be involved one way or another. And we collaborate internally with our external partners and agencies, internally and externally. So common goal. We have a common goal on these specialty projects. Project development team is also built, and wanted to also mention that Caltrans as a whole, we are responsible. We providing a quality management assessment for the portions of work that are within an existing right-of-way, highway system right-of-way, during the project approval, environmental, or PS&E, which is plan specs and estimate phases. And then Caltrans will also provide environmental document, quality control, and reviewing and approving of a project improvements in accordance with all the applicable state and federal laws, regulations. And so all in all, we benefit enormously by working together and collaborating with all subject matter experts to gain advantage, providing everyone in California with a robust, innovative solutions to these problems.
Right, thank you, Julie. Teamwork makes the dream work, right?
Teamwork, yes.
Anybody else would like to add to that, or? All right.
complete answer. I
Great.
couldn't say it better.
All right. Also, I put another link in the chat from Morgan Robertson. Robertson, one of our team members here at Caltrans. She did just put a link to me for the D5 Highway 17 Laurel Curve story map, kind of similar to Dooley's story map. Really a great piece of content there to look at in your own time. Thank you, Morgan, for sharing that. Super appreciative of everybody adding their resources in here and answering questions. All right, so next up, I think, is you, Harriet.
A final question, and then we'll get to a couple questions in the chat, but David hasn't spoken for a while. So let's give you a chance to close us out, David, no pressure. So there must be a lot of challenges that come with the development of these crossings, right? So can you share kind of what are some of the biggest challenges that you've come across?
Specific to our project, I mean, overall, our project was a fairly simple run-of-the-mill project where we're just installing a culvert across the ground. Obviously, the scale of it is a little bit larger than our normal 36-inch diameter culvert, being these are nearly 20-foot diameter. For us, considering the environment we were in, the environmentally sensitive areas around here and the wetlands, we really didn't have like a viable detour. And considering we only have a 2-lane rural highway, right? We weren't able to just like close one lane and shift traffic over. So we had to do a full closure of US 395. And I don't know who's on the panel or on the line here, but if anybody's ever been up 395, beautiful route, but there is no other alternative route. So our biggest challenge was having to close the road. Our detour was a 2.5-hour detour. It's 110 miles long. So, you know, you can imagine if you had shut down I-5 in the middle of LA and said, okay, everybody go 2.5 hours, 110 miles around. Nobody would really care for that, right? I think that was like one of our biggest challenges. Again, it really just had to do with it being a 2-lane rural highway. And we don't have those multi-lanes to divert traffic. It was a massive endeavor. We coordinated with so many agencies. I mean, it literally cut Mono County in half. The sheriff's department had to completely rearrange their staffing. CHP had to do the same. United States Postal Service had to change their routing. The Marine Corps has a base here. They had to change everything around. I mean, that was a massive challenge. But I won't lie, not a challenge specific to Animal Crossings. It was just a challenge more specific to putting a pipe under or large diameter pipe under a rural 2-lane road with wetlands on either side of it.
And how long did the project take, David?
Yeah, I mean, I can kind of quickly, I'll show you just one little image of kind of, here you can see a video of us installing one of these pipes, and you could just see it's just a 2-lane road, and you could see a creek on the right and you can see the creek on the left because again, our culverts kind of followed the creek line. So there's no way to put in what we call a shoe fly road or a diversion road or anything like that. So that was our biggest challenge. It affected a lot of people. It was kind of crazy. We spent like 4 months just in planning once we picked the date, just to figure out how many, coordinate with all the agencies. I mean, CAL FIRE had to change their fire response plans during this because we cut them in half also. So
wow.
Was that a little maintenance road that was created by the
I saw that.
contractor?
Yeah, it was a Forest Service road. Now on this one, there was this little tiny dirt road, but we couldn't expand on it due to permit issues. But we also had another Animal Crossing about 1.5 miles down the road. There was no available detour. To be perfectly honest, I had to drive my state truck to the job. We had to start digging, and then I had to have my wife come pick me up because I couldn't even drive home. Like that's how much this cut off.
Wow.
I had to drive. It was
challenging.
kind of a cutoff. Not even Caltrans staff could make it through this detour.
But I think it's important, like before when we mentioned all the support staff, I think it's important to recognize most districts, and I know David over there, you guys are, I mean, it's really, you're spread out, I know. But most districts, they have a public information office. And all that outreach, like when I was bragging about how we had like 25 night closures or whatever it was with no public complaints, or David, the fact that you guys were able to do that closure, coordinating with all those people. We have public information office doing all that outreach. We have government affairs that's making sure that the state and all these other agencies, their sort of the boundaries of their legal obligations are still intact and they don't get kind of compromised with our work. It's important for everyone to understand, like the federal highway system was envisioned as a component of our national security, right, and national defense. So anytime we're interacting with it, it's not just getting in the way of, David, in your case, right, not getting in the way of folks getting up to Mammoth for a wonderful weekend. It's, you know, we're interrupting services and commerce. So that's really, really important. Our challenge, David, I mean, yours is like beyond comprehension. 2.5 hours just as an RE, when you know that your project is causing a 2.5 hour detour, you're not relaxed until it's done. You're just always wound up. You're just waiting for that next call.
A day on site for 15 days straight, just trying to make sure everything looked perfect.
That is extremely intense, and bravo to you. My biggest technical challenge outside of the closure that we had on 101, but it wasn't extended like David, so like it was a little more relaxing for me. But I would say one of our more interesting challenges is just nailing the technical specifics of the planting soils, right? So like we talked about how we went for a hyper-local seed strategy, or I should say the project team did. It's not like I did, right? The entire project team went for this hyper-local seed strategy. Also, we're curating, okay, the dirt. The dirt is not just any old dirt. It's not just something you can go and pick up from somewhere else, because it turns out that dirt is not dead. It's actually quite alive. And there's a whole profile of microorganisms that thrive in different environments, right? And so when you talk about implementing a naturally occurring landscape and stitching together that which was cleaved by our freeways, that dirt has to have a similar biological profile. So actually, a lot of the planting soil mix is amended with a soil amendment that is essentially, I want to say it right, but it's being inoculated with local soil cultures and fungus, so that when that is placed there, that biological process allows for all those microorganisms in the soil to kind of create a regenerative environment. Otherwise, it turns into another one of our Caltrans landscape type deals, which are beautiful nonetheless, but they are engineered landscapes. That's what we're used to doing. We're used to doing engineered landscapes that look nice, have a certain function, but not necessarily to mimic the naturally occurring landscape. So I thought that was one of our more interesting technical challenges on our job.
Very interesting.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm glad that you added that, Sam. I remember talking about that before previously. Very interesting insights on that. All right. So I think we're wrapping up here. We've got like 6 minutes here. We've got a lot of questions, and anything else we want to cover before we take any questions, Harry, that you can think of, or?
Just wanted to throw this up real quick. Just a moment for all the partners, if you wanted to lead us on that, Laura. I know there's been a lot of inspiration, so just wanted to give them a quick shout out.
Yeah, definitely want to, like Harry said, give a shout out to a lot of the partners here that have collaborated with us, give us a lot of great content and footage. We shared this on LinkedIn, like I mentioned before earlier in some of these webinars, but special thank you to Beth Pratt with National Wildlife Federation, Devin O'Day with Backcountry Hunters and Anglers, Pathways for Wildlife, Cougar Magic, Land Trust of Santa Cruz County, Michael Lingberg, who is a PIO for District 9, Michael Como, recently retired PIO for District 7, and Kevin Drabinski, PIO for District 5. Big thank you to all. We appreciate everything that you have partnered with us and shared with us to make this even more richer of a conversation with everybody, give them the visuals and just show them behind the scenes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and also I did put the link in the chat for registering for episode. Gosh, I don't remember the number now, Harry. Are we on episode 18 in May?
18.
Yeah, episode 18. Thank you. We're gonna be talking with Avalanche Control Team. Super exciting content again for that one. Don't miss it. We're already in the works with these guys and getting like video and photos, and we've had Caltrans blasters in the past, but these guys are doing it in the snow. So make sure you register for that webinar coming up.
Yeah, so and just want to take a huge moment for our panel today. So I see there's a lot of emoji love happening right now. People are sending in the shout outs, but seriously, thank you so much to you all for being here today, sharing your incredible insights, sharing your knowledge, educating us, because my gosh, we've learned a lot. So interesting and just so commendable to see how dedicated you are, both to your trade and also to the wildlife and the communities that you're serving. So really huge shout out to you all. You're incredible individuals, and we're just so grateful to be able to share your stories here today. So thank you for being a part of this.
Yes, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
And for those who sent got some questions in that we didn't get to, we will capture all of the remaining questions and send those out to our awesome panel to get some answers there. But since we are at time, just wanted to give a shout out to you all again. Shout out to our audience too. Thank you for hanging in for this special 1.5 hour episode, because we got some serious engagement going the entire time. So you guys are pretty interesting, I guess. So
thank you for always returning.
Yeah, no kidding. Thank you so much. When you close out of the episode, it will take you to a quick feedback survey. Please take literally a minute or two to complete the survey. It's only like 3 or 4 questions. Your survey feedback helps us to continue to make these more and more awesome and deliver more and more interesting topics. So we really appreciate that. And if you have any suggestions for future topics, if you are interested in certain projects or people of Caltrans, contact us at dhr.communications@dot.ca.gov. And we will definitely try and make that happen. Anything else you wanted to add there, Laura?
Yeah, I just put the link in the chat for our direct email for, like Harriet said, any questions for us on this webinar. If you're interested in a career with Caltrans, I know we have a lot of people here just checking out the opportunities. We'll definitely connect you with the right people.
I was going to add something too, real quick. I think we alluded to it at multiple times during the event here, but you're getting to hear from one person on a team of 60, 70, 80, 100 people. I think we all alluded to it in one way or the other. But for anyone who thinks out there, not sure on the attendee list, California Department of Transportation, right? We think roads, bridges, highways, but there are so many people involved in these projects, environmentalists, all the way down to, the frog in this area or the plant in this area, surveys, construction specific, like we talked about. But I just wanted to highlight that you're getting one person here representing the project, but it's a team that makes it happen, truly, as well as our partners external to Caltrans. So I just wanted to reiterate that.
Good point, Chad.
Really good point. Yeah, you guys have really highlighted teamwork in this episode. It's awesome. So much collaboration happens. And obviously you're experts in your own right, but there's so much that goes into it, and partners that you rely on to make these projects come to fruition. So just really cool to hear more insights on that. So thank you. Thank you.